Sekeres and Price featuring Jeff Pettersson from the Wall Center. And don't forget, any feedback, you can always visit the Great Clips inbox, 778-402-9680, 37 salons in Vancouver and the Lower Mainland. It's also the official salon of the NHL, which is maybe why Mike Kelly's got such great flow, because he's from the NHL Network and Sports Logic, and he joins us here to talk about the Final Four in the National Hockey League and how we got here. Mike, thanks for doing this. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. And I know I told you since this is video, I was going to brush my hair, and I didn't get a chance to do that. So it's
if that's non-brushed.
I need to get to a great clips, that's for sure.
If that is non-brushed, my goodness, you're a lucky man. We're down to the Final Four. I have been ranting and raving, not so much, just noticing the substantial lack of superstar talent in the National Hockey League. And you know, it's just amazing that the brightest of lights in the NHL playoffs just have not been able to get to this Final Four. And that is not meant to denigrate at all any of the four teams that are there, or maybe Matthew Tkachuk or Rupe Hintz, who are the best players that are left in the NHL playoffs. But can you add anything to this phenomena that we've seen so far in these playoffs?
Yeah, it's crazy. I think, like, I was shocked after the first round looking at the goalies that were left. I'm like, Saros didn't make it. Shesterkin's out. Sorokin's out. Hellebuck's out. Vasilevsky's out. Like, Ottinger was the last kind of big-name guy still in. And he still is, but so that's one of them from the goalie standpoint. And then the players as well. Like, look, it's the most team game that exists, I think, in North America, right? So Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, even the two of them on the same team, for all that they can do, they can't do everything. And in the end, you know, better teams typically are the ones that move on. So, like, Vegas, top to bottom, their defensive depth was better. They've got good forward depth. Aiden Hill, like, we didn't see this coming. I didn't see this coming. There's bizarre stories. The scoring's as high as it's been in years, and that's translated into the playoffs as well. I should be able to understand a lot more of this. I don't. Like, I'm like batting 500 with my playoff picks this year. It's a crazy year, but this is why I love hockey. This is what makes it so much fun, is that, yeah, an 8 seed can beat a 1 seed. An 8 seed can go to a conference final.
Is this an outlier? Or is this a possibility going forward to see that these teams, and, you know, not everybody is an expansion team like the Kraken and the Vegas Golden Knights, but you could make the argument that some teams are kind of built like those new age expansion teams. Is that a better way of doing things than the National Hockey League?
Well, look, if it's a copycat league, which it often is, I think the one thing you're looking at this year is depth and forecheck pressure, like being able to force your opponents into mistakes. That's Carolina, that's Florida. Not so much Vegas and like the strong kind of hard forecheck. But Dallas can do it too. So you're getting teams that can roll a lot of lines that have big, good defensemen. Like Carolina's D is probably the best in the league in terms of being big, physical, offensive, defensive. Dallas has a superstar defenseman, Amiro Heiskanen, and Vegas is imposing and all that too. So Florida's got Montour and Gudis and Ekblad and
Forsling, yeah.
Got Gustav Forsling, who's had a great year. I was working with Billy Lindsay the other night, who's a Florida Panthers guy, and he's raving about Forsling. So I think you could look at the template as just get a lot of really good, smart players who are quick and play the game smart and can play within a system that you think can work and translate into the playoffs. That's how Seattle built their team. That's how Carolina looked to build a team from kind of an analytical approach. A lot of people I talk to in kind of the sphere that I work in say the same thing, which is find value contracts, find guys that can drive play, that are quick, forecheck, do all those things, and you can have a really solid, balanced team from top to bottom that will be competitive.
Mike, we always talk about, you won't truly know if a guy's a playoff performer until he gets that opportunity, and Jack Eichel in Buffalo didn't get that opportunity, but he's certainly showing in his first look at Stanley Cup playoff action that he's up to the challenge.
Yeah, he's been awesome. I think he's benefited probably from a couple of things, which is Bruce Cassidy being his coach, who is a guy that's pretty tuned into the defensive details of the game. You look at what he had done in Boston, what he's done in Vegas. But also, and I don't know this, but you have to think Mark Stone has had a pretty nice impact on Eichel. Stone's one of the best kind of all-around forwards in the league in doing everything well. Like there's no question Jack Eichel has improved in being more of an all-around player. His playmaking was always elite. He's developed a real high-end shot. His transition play, puck moving has always been elite. But we're watching him compete in all three zones for pucks and doing things that maybe you didn't see quite as much in Buffalo. And I'm sure some of that comes from, you don't have to be the offensive guy. Like you don't have to cheat for offense. You don't have to just worry about scoring a goal or two a night. Just be a guy on our team. And what you're seeing is like a terrific player having a terrific playoffs, which I don't think is that surprising. What I think is very impressive is that his overall game looks better than it ever has, in my view.
You touched on the Dallas Stars a second ago. Again, good team, well coached, all of that. But in the regular season, they're led by a 46-goal scorer in Jason Robertson, who's sitting on 2 right now, and he scored in the playoff opener against Minnesota and has 1 since, doesn't score in a 7-game series against the Seattle Kraken. Obviously, other guys have picked up, but it's hard to imagine that Dallas can continue to progress here in the playoffs without their true gunner finding the back of the net at some point.
Totally agree. But if he does, it's like you're adding that, right? So imagine adding that to what Dallas has already done. And Vegas is going to be, like, I would predict Vegas to win the series. It can be close and all that, of course, but it's not going to be easy for Dallas by any means. And Pavelski's going to be around the net doing his thing. Robertson, when I'm looking at his numbers in the regular season and the playoffs, and I say this about all scorers, like, how much did we focus on the fact that Auston Matthews didn't score in the second round? A ton. We didn't focus that much on Matthew Tkachuk not scoring or Jason Robertson not scoring. Well, their teams won, right? So you go into the next round, I think they're going to have Jason Robertson to score if they want to try to win that series. And I said it about Matthews, and I'll say it about Robertson, and it's true of Stamkos and Ovechkin and any elite goal scorer who scores at volume. You still have to get around the net to score goals. Even if you've got a great shot, even if you can score on a one-timer from a circle or from the high slot, like upwards of 40% of the goals that are scored by those kind of guys still come from that net front inner slot area. And Robertson in the playoffs compared to the regular season, his shots from there have been cut in half. Hard to get there in the playoffs, right? But you have to do it. So in Game 7, he had a lot of good looks. He could have easily scored a goal, maybe 2. That's encouraging, right? And that's all you can ask from those kind of guys is get your good looks from good spots. But I still see him on the power play. He's kind of up high, and obviously Pavelski's going to have that spot. But you can find ways to kind of move yourself in and around, maybe for second chance opportunities, loose pucks, those kind of things. So maybe that can help him.
Not anything new, but power plays have a role in the playoffs. And, Canucks fans remember this all too well. If the Canucks had only executed on the power play in the Stanley Cup final, of course, they would have won in 2011. But, of course, the Edmonton Oilers executed on the power play a ton. It didn't do them any great service in getting to the third round as well. I mean, you go out and you try. It's not like you ignore the power play. But do you think teams are going to focus more on 5-on-5 success, given what's happened with some of these high-skilled teams?
Well, they should. I mean, that's where 80% of the game's played, right? So I'd take a really good 5-on-5 team over a power play team. Sometimes they're two of the same, which, Edmonton, like that power play was better in the playoffs, which is crazy. They were almost 50%, I think, right? So if that gets you a goal or two a game, I mean, you don't even have to win at 5-on-5. You just have to be close. So it does get tougher, though. You face a team that can kill penalties well. I mean, Carolina's still kicking around. They've always had one of the best penalty kills in the league. So, like, if you're Dallas, you can't just be sitting there thinking, oh, you might not get your power play goals. So, yeah, 5-on-5 is hugely important. That's one of the reasons why Edmonton in a close series didn't move on, is that Vegas outscored them quite handily at 5-on-5 and carried more of the play in the end than Edmonton did. So, yeah, it's a huge part of the game, and I think ultimately for a team to be successful in the playoffs, you have to be one of the best teams in that area.
And you are picking Vegas over Dallas by smidge?
Yeah, if I'd pick Vegas over that. Like, I think Vegas is going to beat Carolina in the Cup final. I see that pretty clear in my head. Again, batting pretty much 500 here. So, but I did pick Vegas over Edmonton. I just, though I did pick Winnipeg over Vegas. So again, I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. But Vegas has gotten kind of stronger as they've gone. Every move Bruce Cassidy has made has been good. Like putting Howden with Stone and Stevenson in game 2 against Winnipeg. That line's been great. Putting Barbashev with Eichel in game 5 of the Winnipeg series on that line. That's been great. Going to Adin Hill. I mean, he didn't have a choice, but Adin Hill played out of his mind. Like everything just seems to be slotting in the way that it should for that team. They're deep. And that'd be a great final, honestly, them against Carolina. Like I said this yesterday, you can look at the 4 teams, you can look at the 4 cities, you can look at the 4 markets. It's not New York, it's not Boston, it's not Montreal, Toronto, whatever. This is going to be really good hockey. Like if you just like watching good hockey, you're going to get that out of the 4 teams that are left here.
So you've tipped your hand. You've told us what you think the final is going to be, and so that suggests that Carolina gets past Florida. What do you think that series looks like?
I think it looks very similar. I did something on the NHL Network yesterday on this. I call it the anti-possession possession game, where you got really 2 of the best examples of teams that give up the puck a ton, but know how to get it back. And like you look at puck on stick possession in the playoffs, just the time. They're the 2 last teams in the league in the amount of time they spend with a puck on their stick, 15 and 16. They dump it out more than anyone. They dump it in more than anyone. They win battles at a very high rate. So why do you do that? Well, you're not turning a lot of pucks over at either blue line by trying to skate your way through people. You're constantly just getting it out, racing to it, winning it, getting to it, racing to it, winning it. They play a similar game that way. The forecheck, huge part, right? So I think you're going to see a lot of similarities in how they play. Bobrovsky is the X factor because we know what he can do. He can steal a series. He's playing out of his mind. If he does that, it's possible. But I think Carolina, I shouldn't say I think, I know they're a much better defensive team than Florida is. I think that's maybe where we'll see a big difference. But then, if the Canes get 15 good chances in a game and Florida gets just 10, how much of that can Bobrovsky make up?
Before you go, want to bring this to the Canucks, and but the flat cap has allowed us one thing, and that is to sort of take a static look over a handful of years. What dollar figures should be allocated here and there. Much like Auston Matthews in Toronto, Elias Pettersson is up for an extension possibility this summer. Have we learned lessons on how many double-digit million-dollar players every team should have in terms of that allocation we talked about earlier and creating depth on the team? It's 3 too many, and that's number's only going to go up for Auston Matthews, you'd have to think, as the Canucks are likely set to give double digits to Elias Pettersson. Is 1 enough? Do you go role players from there on down if you've got that one $10 to $12 million player?
I would probably, if all things are equal and you can build an expansion team kind of like Seattle has, I would probably go that route, yes. I think you still need to have difference makers, and those cost money. At the same time, you look at the Toronto example, they've got $40 million tied up in 4 guys, right? I think their forward cap is 70, low 70 something. It's like 73, 75% of their forward cap is 4 guys. So if all things are equal, they need to provide you with 70, 75% of your offense. That's not realistic. You can't expect that in a playoffs for sure, and they didn't get that. The depth suffers because of it. And if those guys, whether it's 1 or 2 of those guys or 4 of those guys, can carry it all the time, then sure. But how realistic is that? I think Toronto in their best interest would probably be, just given where things sit now, is maybe you move on from a guy like Marner and you pay Nylander, 8.5, 9, whatever it's going to cost. Austin's going to get his deal. It's a number 1 center, elite player. This isn't a knock on Mitch Marner, but what could you do with $11 million in cap space plus assets you would get back? Probably a lot.
Yeah.
So maybe it sounds like a crazy thing to say, but this hasn't worked. There's no evidence to suggest that is going to work. So in the Vancouver sense of things, yeah, Pettersson, to me, he's going to be a 90 plus, maybe 100 as he was, plus point guy who is in Selke trophy conversations. as a finalist. So I think I know he's on ballots this year, and I would have had him probably 4 or 5. He's a guy you pay. But then, you can't reverse engineer this, but the JT Millers of the world, you probably don't give that kind of money to them. The Bo Horvats of the world, you can't, maybe that's where you can't do it.
Pleasure as always, Mike. Thanks for making the time at a busy time of the season. Appreciate the chat, and we'll talk somewhere down the road.
Happy to do it, guys. Thanks, and keep up the good work.